Hello, welcome to Explorations in Economic History.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about the failure of war communism.
Bolshevik leaders were savvy politicians, and they understood that after coming to power, they could win the hearts and minds of the people by distributing resources at little to no charge to win the support of the masses. So in the winter of 1919-1920, the Soviet department Komprod provided services such as utilities and housing for little or no cost to about 38 million people, even though they knew that this would be an unsustainable policy. It was made possible by, first of all, appropriating agricultural surpluses from especially the wealthy peasants, paying with worthless currency or none at all, and the fact that buildings and many of the other resources were readily available from the previous government. And in this time, the government only built or repaired just a few thousand buildings during the whole period. So, I mean, this was good for the people, and it definitely won them some support, but it wasn't actually a long-term policy that they could keep going. Of course, the Bolshevik government took credit for these kinds of policies and gave the credit to their socialist plans. For example, in 1919, the Executive Committee of the Communist International told the world, everything which the industries produce goes now not to enrich a small parasitical section of the community, but the whole community. In each town and district, there are local councils of public economy linked up to the supreme body. The system of public management does away with a whole host of middlemen, who in capitalist countries make huge profits at the expense of the consumers.
So to the world, everything was going great. They were making great claims to success of communism. But 3 months into power, January 1918, there's this horrific quote that this was in the meeting of the Presidium of Petrograd Soviet with delegates from the food supply organizations. So there were terrible food supply problems, which were, yes, partly to do with having just been in a world war and having just undergone a tumultuous revolution. But the policies that the Bolsheviks put into place as soon as they came into power prevented markets from being able to supply food. And then Lenin says that it is there's the facts of abuse are glaring, the speculation monstrous. Of course, what was speculation? I mean, for the most part, it just was. It meant anything to do with markets, anything to do with having private ownership over supplies. So people could not go to market and supply food. So that's why there were problems with food supply. There were instead, the markets had been replaced with food supply organizations, and anytime that people tried to provide food in the black market, they were called speculators. And at this time in 1918, they could be shot on the spot, or any kind of other, harsh punishment. And Lenin argued that the rich section of the population must be left without bread for 3 days to make sure that they weren't hoarding excess food. Well, so why was there widespread speculation, as Lenin called it, when there were harsh punishments for engaging in black market activity? Why did it continue? If Lenin's reports of great success were true, why would people still engage in such dangerous activity? Well, there were practical reasons. The state stores, which they were putting into place, which were supposed to offer wonderful, as we'll see, wonderful rational distribution and so forth, depended on, of course, their centralized distribution plan, and they faced chronic shortage. But the private market was able to fill in where the state stores failed. So as they nationalized more and more of retail, black markets popped up to replace what they were unable to provide, what was coming up in shortage, and or poor quality, maybe things decaying, because the supply chain was very slow. So the black markets popped up to replace what the state couldn't do. So what were the Soviet leaders trying to do? Well, they believed, Lenin and the Bolshevik leaders believed that the capitalist markets offered only shoddy goods at exorbitant prices, and essentially they wanted to offer a much fairer and also more efficient system. So socialist distribution would offer a centralized system of state retailing supported by rural retail cooperatives. This is what they promised. They said that this rational distribution system would be more efficient and would make use of economies of scale and scope and would allow the government to ensure equal availability and affordability of consumer goods. So this was what they promised, and this is what they were intending to create. Of course, the reality wasn't quite as utopian. And for example, about 3,400 private retail outlet stores were closed down, shut down during war communism, and were supposed to be replaced by a wonderful streamlined socialist system, but only 133 cooperative and state stores managed to replace them by 1923. So throughout that whole period, until, in 1923, of course, the private stores were able to start opening back up again. But so those 133 cooperative and state stores did not come through and provide all of the merchandise and all of the the good service, or even just, the bare basics. That's why war communism was such a failure, because they were unable to supply all areas, even with basics, even with food and so forth. And the stores that were opened were dirty and inefficient and so on and so forth, according to all accounts. So in short, eliminating the private middleman, which was supposed to allow for a streamlined, rational distribution system, actually meant that the state was responsible for all production and distribution, and this was far too difficult a task. The state supply mechanism was so faulty that there were so many shortages that even facing the threat of execution, private trade flourished in order to fill in where the state was failing. So why did this happen? Of course, Austrian economists had predicted something quite like this.